This is Radio TV Phono Nut, and today we have an Olympic AM/FM stereo 8-track tape player from, I believe, 1971, maybe 72. This is one of two stereo systems that was given to me the other day by a friend who is downsizing and preparing to move into another house. And I have the matching record changer and the matching speakers for this set, but I'll wait a little while to show you those. First, we need to get the receiver working properly. You'll love the record changer. I'm not going to spoil the fun and tell you what it is just yet. You can see we have our track change button, headphone jack, left volume, right volume, tone control, power switch, our function selector, and our tuning knob. Olympic is actually an old brand that goes back to the 1930s, I believe, but I think it was 1957, they were purchased by Lear Siegler, and I believe in 1971 is when Lear sold the brand name, and then shortly after that the brand was deactivated. This unit doesn't mention Lear Siegler anywhere on it, so I think it might have been made after the sale. And I'm also 99.9% sure that this stereo receiver is a rebadged Electrophonic. Okay, with all that said, let's turn it on and see what happens. And we're tuned to an FM stereo broadcast. Let's bring the left volume up. As you can hear, very distorted audio. Let's bring the right volume up. Same thing. Now, since it's doing it on both channels, and that leads me to believe that the most likely problem is something that's common to both channels, like a missing power supply voltage, or we could have something rare happen and the same components be bad on both channels. So let's open it up and find out. Now, I've already opened this up to clean the potentiometers, these controls here, so I already know how to get in this thing. You remove the knobs, you unscrew the nut holding the headphone jack in place, you unscrew the back panel, you remove the screws from the bottom of the set, and then the whole chassis slides out the back. Here's the chassis, and here are the 4 output transistors, 2 for each channel. Here's the 8-track tape player assembly. I've disconnected it from the main chassis just to make it a little easier to work on. Okay, the first thing I'd like to do is check the voltages on the output transistors and see how those look, and if anything looks out of line, I'll bring it to your attention. Okay, this is strange to say the least. I don't have an exact schematic for this stereo, so I'm just more or less going on guesswork. When I run the set at 120 volt standard line voltage, it distorts like crazy. However, when I run the set at 60 volts AC line input, it's actually clear, and you can...
Of music for your workday is only on 106.9 The Eagle.
Now, listen to what happens when I crank it up, crank the AC input up. Well, now it's gonna there it goes, distorted. So I'm starting to think the problem has to do with the biasing on the output transistors. Another observation, it's amazing what a few volts more B plus can do. We have our voltmeter connected to the positive terminal of the main filter capacitor. running about 13.3 volts B plus voltage there. And you can hear it's relatively clean audio. Now let's run it up. 17 volts, and it's distorting like crazy. Okay, I've been playing around with the emitter resistors on the output transistors. The originals are 1 ohm, and they still check okay. I have 1.8 ohm resistors in one channel. And as you can hear, it's still distorted, but not as bad as the channel with the original 1 ohm resistors. So I may be way off base here with the theory I'm about to present, but I'm thinking that even though these output transistors check good on the meter, I think their characteristics might have shifted over the years, and they might not have the same characteristics as they once did. So I think the next step is just to replace all 4 output transistors and see what that does. And yes, if you haven't already figured it out now, solid state's a little bit different ball game than tube stuff. In a tube amplifier, the voltages can be off by plus or minus 50%, and the thing will still work to some degree of normalcy. In a solid state set like this, the voltages can only be off a tiny bit and throw the whole thing out of whack. Okay, this has been an interesting journey, and still don't know if it's 100% fixed yet. Only time will tell. While working on it, I was monitoring the bias voltage on one of the left channel output transistors, and for a split second the audio approached normal. The bias voltage went up, and both audio output transistors for the left channel shorted. Well, fortunately, I yanked the plug before they had a chance to burn up anything else. And these are what our transistors look like. These are basically just, I believe these are TO92 case transistors that are epoxied inside of a heat sink. Well, I dug around in my junk, and I found a couple of old Sylvania ECG replacements. These cross-reference to, one of them was an ECG 192A and the other one was an ECG 193A. Well, I had an ECG 193A, but I only had an ECG 192 minus the A. Now, the only difference I can find between the two is the 192 has a different base than the 192A, so I just simply had to reverse a couple of leads around, and it seems to be working now. I also replaced a bunch of resistors that were borderline out of tolerance. I did that before the original output transistor shorted. And some people think I'm paranoid by replacing these resistors in tube sets. Well, I'm even more paranoid when it comes to solid state amplifiers, because I've learned from experience, especially in the bigger amplifiers, that you can replace a whole slew of bad semiconductors and other components, think you've got it fixed, turn it on, and it'll burn everything up that you just put in there, all because of one little resistor that you may have overlooked. All these capacitors on the modern capacitance meter, they check 2 to 3 times higher than what they should. And on the old style capacitance tester here, all of the little capacitors like 4.7 to 10 microfarad have high ESR, so those needed to be replaced. But right now, we seem to be working.
Get you 5,000 to 200
Again.
in Central Park this weekend. You'll...
RV 105.7 The Beat.
I think that tuning cap's a little dirty. Uses one of those little plastic tuning capacitors like what you'd find in a transistor radio.
I'm feeling warm and
Talking to me?
Yeah, you want to take?
You sure you're ready for this? Your best. We whine about that best. Ready. Super Talk Mississippi and supertalk.fm. You can be a part of the show. Call the Farm Bureau.
Now, one thing to take note of that I'm sure you probably already know if you're familiar with these older stereos like this, these cheapies are not known for maximum power low distortion, so you can't crank these all the way up and expect clean audio. So all I know to do at this point is let it run, hope nothing else burns up, and then we'll put it back together. If it does burn up again, I might do what Jordan Pierce suggested. I'm sure some of you know him. He works at a vintage electronics repair shop in California. I was discussing this with him, and he brought it to my attention of a little 3-watt German stereo amplifier module that he gets from a place called Parts Express. I think they're available from other sources too. They run about $15 and put out about 1.5 watts per channel. And he told me usually when we get a receiver like this that wants to be a problem child, we'll just disable the original amp and install one of those little power modules that cost about $15 and we're good to go. And honestly, I imagine the little German power module is probably a better amplifier than what's on this board anyway. But if this one behaves itself, we'll let it go at what's on here. If the amplifier chooses to mess up again, then I'll order one of those little power modules and we'll add it to the circuit.
On 95.1, The Buzz.
It's been on about hour and a half, 2 hours now, and nothing is smoked. So I think I'm going to clean the 8-track mechanism, connect it back up, and see if the 8-track works. Okay, I've cleaned the 8-track tape mechanism. And we have this lovely Reader's Digest tape set here. Green Grass of Home. Let's stick one of them in and see what happens. Well, and it appears that we're dead. Our motor's certainly not. Well, if I'd set it to tape instead of phono, it might do something. Yeah, unwind the tape. Well, that tape kind of broke. Let's try another tape. Well, that don't sound too bad.
Through all eternity, the crying of humanity. 'Twas then when the hurdy-gurdy man.
Now this belt will have to be replaced soon. But that doesn't have to be done today, but it will need to be done in the near future.
Chance of a widely scattered storm in from the north-northwest tonight.
Here we are back together with the original speakers.
Along with the 35% chance of widely scattered storms, mainly afternoon. High at 86. Followed then on Thursday by partly cloudy at 40% chance of more storms, mainly afternoon and evening, and a high of around 86 as well. I'm meteorologist Alan Archer, Weather Authority.
Your Weather Authority.
From there, we are Meridian's classic country leader, Classic Country 97.9.
And Lauren.
About do it for the receiver. Now let me show you the record changer that goes with this unit.
Forsake the courtyard. 52.
Well, now that we have the receiver going, I thought I'd show you the record changer that came with it. And you can see it has the Olympic emblem on the lid, so this is the changer that came with the stereo. This changer was made by Maestro, and it's date-coded October 1971. Now, I'll say in 25-plus years of doing this, I've never ran across this particular record changer. The closest I've ever come to that was in some Magnavox products from the early 70s. They used a very similar record changer that functions basically the same way, and I think that particular changer was made in Great Britain by Calero, who also made the better quality changers that Magnavox used. And I will say that Magnavox got in some hot water over that particular changer because it cost them a pretty penny in warranty repairs and record changer replacement under warranty. Now this changer, as you can see, only has one control, off, on, and reject. There's no speed selector control because that's determined automatically. And the way that is determined is by this little pin here in the center of the turntable. When a 12-inch record with a small standard size spindle hole falls down and hits the platter, it depresses this pin, which tells the unit to switch to 33 1/3 RPM and tells the tone arm to set down on the 12-inch position. When you play a 7-inch 45 RPM record that has a large spindle hole, you have to use this adapter here. Let's see if I can get it on here. There we go. Now, when a large spindle hole 45 drops down onto the platter, the record does not press this button down, and that tells the machine to switch to 45 RPM and to set the tone arm on the 7-inch position. Now, the main disadvantage with that arrangement is if you're playing a 12-inch 45 RPM single with a standard spindle hole, then the machine is going to think you're playing a 33 1/3 RPM record. And if you try to play a 7-inch 45 RPM record with a standard size small spindle hole, then the machine is still going to think you're playing a 33 RPM record, and the tone arm is going to set down on the 12-inch position. So in either case, you're out of luck. So the only kind of records you can play on this are 12-inch 33 1/3 RPM LPs and 7-inch 45 RPM records with the large spindle hole. I guess you could play older 10-inch 33 1/3 RPM LPs with a standard spindle hole, but you would have to place the tone arm manually on the record. And even when playing large center hole 45s, you have to use this adapter. You can't play the record with a little snap-in yellow or red or whatever color inserts, because if you do that, it will press this button down and fake the record changer into setting on the 33 RPM setting. Now we'll look under the hood, and the way you remove this changer from the base is you lift up on the lockdown tabs and turn them, and then the changer will just simply lift out here. Here's the underside of the changer. It uses an Alliance motor, and you can see the name on it. It says Maestro. That's who built it. Now, part of this, especially this area right here, looks like they copied a Voice of Music design. The rest of it, who knows where they got the design from. The way you lock the changer down for transport is hold it down and then move the little lock thing in the correct direction, and that locks it down. Here's our tone arm lock. You can see it has a little protrusion on the tone arm, and that locks the tone arm in place. Now, when I first tested this changer, the 45 RPM function didn't want to engage, but the second time I tested it, everything worked. Now, this cartridge is bad. It's a Barco TN4B cartridge, and the rubber suspension has fallen out of it. And since this is a 2-speed unit that doesn't have 78 RPM, I'm going to replace it with a Fan Steel P188 cartridge, aka the Crosley cartridge. Now, since we don't have 78 RPM, we don't need a flip over stylus, so the Crosley cartridge will work just fine in here. Now, when replacing the cartridge, you want to be very careful not to break the leads here. It's very easy to do, and it's a pain in the butt to resolder them back. So the best thing to do is take a very small flat blade screwdriver and gently push each connector off of the cartridge, taking note of which connector goes where so you can connect the new cartridge properly. Then unclip the old cartridge. Very carefully slide the cartridge connectors over the new cartridge pins, and then very carefully clip the cartridge back in place. Here's the cartridge we'll be using. This was a very popular cartridge starting in the 1980s and is still being used in the Crosley reproduction record players. Now, one thing I'll tell you about these modern cartridges, I'm really not that impressed with them, but it's all we have to work with, so I have to make the best of them. And the reason I'm not impressed is it doesn't matter whether it's this cartridge, the P188, the P226, or the P51. It seems like every one of them that I get, the cartridge connecting pins are loose here. In fact, on one of these types of cartridges, I had one of the pins slide up into the cartridge whenever I was trying to connect it. So now the first thing I do when I get one of these types of cartridges, or any new cartridge in with these types of pins, is I glue the pins in place so they'll remain secure, and that way I can slide the cartridge connectors over the pins without the pins either breaking off or sliding up into the cartridge or otherwise making the cartridge non-usable. I mean, you would think with records being more popular today than they've been in 20 or 25 years that these cartridge suppliers would produce a better quality product, but I guess I'm asking for too much there. Okay, we now have the new cartridge installed. Everything went well. Here's our old cartridge. You can see the suspension has fallen out of it, and that was a common problem with these even 20 years ago. This is a Barco TN4B, which Fan Steel makes a knockoff version of it. Now, remember what I said earlier about the loose pins? Now, this is an old cartridge. It's over 40 years old, and you notice the pins are nice and secure. They're not wobbling. That's not the case with these newer cartridges. Like I said, I have to glue the pins in place to make sure they don't either bend or break off or slide back up into the cartridge. Now, let's connect this to the receiver and test it out and make sure it's working okay. Okay, we're all connected and ready for a test. Now, the one thing you want to do, in case I haven't mentioned this before, is when you replace a cartridge or a needle in any kind of turntable or record player, you always want to test it with some junker records first. Because I have gotten cartridges and needles that were either defective or for whatever reason they weren't working right, and they would gouge the record on the first play. And if you want to make me upset, then try ruining one of my good records. So that's why when you test one of these, you want to use some old records and make sure everything's okay first. Alright, let's see what happens. Okay, so it's misbehaving. Well, it might not misbehave if I take the arm off of its rest, off of its locked position. Let's try that again. Yes, I know you're not supposed to handle a record this way, but this one's kind of beat up anyway, so it really doesn't matter. Alright, let's give that another try. Okay, now we're wanting to stall. Okay, yeah, it's going to need a little lubrication, but so far so good. Now, let's try a 45 RPM record and see how it does. Now our tone arm's set down, will need to be adjusted. And now we want to test this with a 45 RPM record that's pressed on polystyrene instead of vinyl. And as some may know, polystyrene is very unforgiving. It wears out much quicker than a vinyl pressing. In fact, if your needle is not just right or slightly worn or whatever, you can ruin a polystyrene record on the first play, where vinyl might be a little more forgiving. In fact, I generally recommend people that have polystyrene pressed 45s to only play them on higher-end turntables with lightweight tracking magnetic cartridges, but even on a properly working turntable with a ceramic cartridge, it shouldn't tear the record up after one play. So let's see what happens here. Okay, it seems to be doing all right. I'm not noticing any abrupt groove color change, and I'm not hearing any sounds in the background. When you see or hear that with a polystyrene record, then that generally means that you're shredding your record. Okay, well that ought to about do it for now. I still need to replace the belt on the 8-track player, and I could probably stand to replace the stereo indicator light just for looks, and I need to do a little more minor adjustment to this turntable, but you've seen me do that so many times, you don't need to see me do it again, and I've wasted enough of your time. So with that said, thanks for watching this long drawn out video, and more to come later. Okay, on second thought, won't leave you hanging with this turntable. I've noticed that it is playing a tad bit slow, and obviously the thing slows down during reject. So I remove the turntable platter, which is plastic platter here. The way you do that is you slide this little rubber gasket thing off. That's another design they copied from VM. And then the turntable platter just lifts off. Now, like in other record players that we've done, we'll first remove this idler wheel, clean it up good, and then we'll take the motor out, clean it and re-lubricate it, and then it ought to be good to go. Well, this is an interesting little motor. It appears that it only has a bottom bearing assembly. This is the first motor I've ever seen like that. And as you can also tell, it doesn't appear to be turning very freely, so it will need to be taken apart and lubricated. Okay, there was no real way for me to get this motor apart to clean it and lubricate it. Fortunately, this turntable has lived in a clean household for its existence. So what I did was I applied some zoom spout oil as best I could to the bottom bearing, and then I used heat from my soldering iron to heat this up, and by capillary action the oil eventually worked its way down in there, and now it spins a little better. Yeah, I like that. That's a lot better than the first time. Okay, we're all back together and we're working better now. The tone arm set down was very tricky, and I still don't know that I have it 100% right yet. There's the screw right there that adjusts that particular function, and this screw here adjusts our tracking pressure. We're at about 5 grams, which is about right for this cartridge. Now the problem we had was it would set down properly on a 12-inch record, but not on a 7-inch record. It would set itself too far in. When I set it to where it would set down on a 7-inch record on the proper position, it didn't go in far enough on a 12-inch record, so I very carefully played with it. And I may have it at a happy medium where it will play both records and not be too far in or not come in far enough. So let's see how it does. We have a couple of LPs on the spindle. Let's see if it drops them down properly.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Okay, let's move to the end, see if we'll shut off properly. Okay, so far so good. Okay, I have 3 45s stacked up on the spindle. Now before I hit the button, let me just say that I like the convenience of playing 45s on an automatic changer because I don't have to get up every 2 or 3 minutes to change records, but these automatic spindles can sometimes be a pain in the butt, and that's with any brand of record changer. They'll either not drop the record, or they'll drop 2 records at the same time, or they'll properly drop the record, but the record being played will slip and slide on the record beneath it, causing all kinds of wow and flutter. Now a lot of that is due to the center holes of the record not being cut equally, and I found that they'll sometimes play better when you use the little snap-in adapters, but like I said before, using the little snap-in adapters is not the best thing on this particular record changer. So let's hit the button and see what happens. And as I would expect, no surprise there, you're not going to work right. Okay, I switched the order of records around. Let's see if that helps. Probably not. No, of course not. Now we're down to 2 records. Let's see if that'll work. See, that one went over a little bit too far. Okay, I adjusted the set down screw just a hair. That looks like that did it. Now when I put an LP on, is it going to land in the right spot? Well, it would help if I would put the overarm down where it would shut off. Alright, let's see. Good deal. Now, I think we can finally wrap this video up.